thank you guys. It's an honor and privilege to speak to you today. I feel at home with all the makers and all the do-it-yourself innovators. And, you know, this project for me, stop moving on. There we go. You know, my book and what I'm about to share with you today is a personal mission to find the truth. And it's been transformative in my life, and I hope it inspires to take a look at how you view energy a little differently. We think with the ideas we have, you know, and sometimes we buy things thinking that we're going to get a lot of value out of it, especially very expensive things. How many of you wish that you could return something that you bought after you bought it? Well, yeah, me too. Especially expensive things, right? But how about if that thing was an idea that was no longer serving you? But the ideas that we're running our world with are kind of running up against those kinds of limits. You know, this is what I think I'm buying, but this is what I'm actually getting. This is what I think I'm working towards, but this is what I'm actually getting. Now we can say, you know, it used to be a lot worse, but the truth is that in our physical world, everything is a matter of, in the physical world, everything is about materials and energy, right? And in the last industrial revolution, we reduced that factor by a factor of 10 or less by the advent of what we thought was cheap renewable fuels. The next evolution has to be exponentially more, and we can't do it with subsidized renewables. It has to be an exponential leap. But there's one idea standing in the way. Is energy really scarce? What if I told you today that energy is actually abundant and it's accessible everywhere, and it can empower everyone to lead an abundant life? Not the kind of abundance that extrapolates the progress of the past, but true abundance where we have more than enough and we lead the highest quality of life that we can possibly live. So you think, well, of course, it's got to be solar, right? You know, there's more than enough photons hitting the Earth in 1 hour that can power the Earth for a whole year. And so, you know, I thought that too. So, you know, I called up my solar panel guy, and the solar panel dude came over and said, it's going to cost me about 60 grand. And, you know, not only that, it's going to take about 20, 30 years. And, you know, I didn't like the sound of that. You know, I have Google, so I looked that up. Turns out that it's about a 40-year dated technology. And we are at about, you know, it used to be at 8 to 9% efficiency, and now we're at about 17 to 18% efficiency, and somehow in the press it's reported as 95% efficiency. And not only that, it's dumping 2.4 million tons of CO2 in India and China. So this can't be a way, so maybe I get an electric car. Well, my options there seem like, well, I can get a car for about $41,000 if I really want it bad enough, you know, about 65 grand. And then I find out, well, you can also do a conversion for between 500 to 1,000 bucks. Well, and that's cool, but there's not enough places to plug it in. Well, if I plug it in my house, it requires that I get a smart meter. My electricity bill goes up, and you know, and it's powered by coal. And coal is, you know, we are using about 7.5 times the size of the Empire State Building. We're burning that every day in this country. That's 2,700,410 tons of coal that's being burned every day. Now, pick this up? Okay, all right. All right, so we'll try it this way. Is that better? Yeah. You know, and then we're promised very cool things. Now we have things like space solar. And space solar is going to take photons from the sky, it's going to zap it down in a microwave with minimum loss, and that's awesome. You know, there's smarter scientists that know this stuff much better than I do, but you know, when I look outside, this is what I see. And I see the utility companies spending you know, millions every year to make sure that rotting poles from 100 years ago don't fall down. So, you know, I kind of ignore this because I got to go shopping. I kind of ignore this because I want my iPad 3. I ignore this because that's just not near me, but this is a little more difficult to ignore. It turns out that about the mid-'80s, we passed our ecological footprint. We're actually using 1.5 times the capacity of the Earth to run our operations. Well, that's kind of highbrow, but this is not. I have friends who've been unemployed for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, super talented people, and the income disparity keeps on going up. And we're spending $1 trillion in Iraq alone. But I thought it said energy was abundant. It was accessible everywhere. It could empower everyone. Well, energy is abundant. Depends on how you look at it. Depends on how you look at it. You know, our hearts, for example, use 0.2 volts to run 2,000 gallons of blood through my system every single day. All it uses is a little bit of potassium, sodium, and a little bit of calcium. Now, we have the technology now to mimic most of our biological functions, as you've heard from other speakers. And so that alone should make us question why we need gigawatts, terawatts, and megawatts to run our world. We can do things today with biochemistry, kinetics, heat, pressure, friction, all kinds of options are available. Biochemistry, for example. This is microbial reverse electrolysis fuel cell. That's a mouthful, but basically what it does, it takes a few grains of salt and it can run everyday waste water or brackish water through a nanofilter, and it can generate unlimited hydrogen fuel, and it uses 1% of the machine to do so. To the right is a guy called Tom Broadbent who came up with using the pressure from your buildings to run your plumbing. We're using heat, kinetics, vibrations. Even the sound of my voice can be captured and reused. We can put a piezoelectric circuits on rubber surfaces, motion. Our devices can be run with simple touch and use light. Dan Nocera from MIT has this very cool technology that uses 10 times the storage in 1/100th of the volume of a commercial fuel cell, and all it does is it takes the excess energy from your photovoltaics, like your solar panels, and turns it into hydrogen fuel cell. Now, it can actually be accessible everywhere. Now, how do we get this stuff from the labs to actually how people use it? Well, maybe that's not the right question to ask. Right now, we have Witricity coming online. We are starting to reuse Tesla-qualified technologies to deliver electricity at the last mile. We have magnetic resonance electron transfer that does not have electron loss, and the standard induction charging is starting to become standardized. So if every place is a power station and every vehicle is a potential transport and storage mechanism, then why do you really need grid-based electricity? And then if you saw Justin Hall Tipping's talk in TED, you already know he talked about nanophotonics. Nanophotonics is using glass and with a nano substrate built right into it that can be flicked on with a simple shift of an electron for a state change. So you can capture photons, or you can emit photons, and you can do it line of sight across town. Now imagine what you can do with this within the context of with cars. And this has the potential to empower everyone. People do amazing things with very little or nothing. This is a bottle light. Bottle light is basically a simple 2-liter bottle of water and some bleach that can be put in tin roofs, and they're doing this in the Philippines, and this is the equivalent of a 50-watt light bulb that does not need to be replaced for almost 5 years. People are doing amazing things with parts of discarded junk, car parts, bicycle parts, and this guy is making wind energy for his village in rural Africa. Now imagine the amount of IP that is stored by oil and gas with some of the innovations that I showed you that have their exit strategies that way. If that was available to guys like this, what kind of things they can do? This is one of my favorite ones. This is done by a 15-year-old kid in Uzbekistan who basically took a DeLorean and turned it into air-powered, a perpetual engine car. It basically runs itself. And he got the plans from multiple innovations that have been suppressed over the years. You can find out a lot about these things on a website called Pure Energy Systems Wiki or pestwiki.com. And this is a deeper topic for another time because there's so many things. There's the Orion Project, there's Project Camelot that showcase a lot of these innovations. Now, can we really do this? Well, consider this. A couple of years ago, there was a thing with Ingersoll Rand that ran a $300 house, house campaign, right? They used this. They were able to do this. Now, if a contest can produce a $300 house with designs like this, imagine what we can do with buildings that we have today. Today, we have amazing grow technologies that can yield in 1,000th of the space of mass agriculture with 1/100th of the water. We saw this guy doing ecological open source ecology. We have local additive manufacturing, and we can even 3D print houses. But here's the thing that I'm going to tell you about all these distributed innovations. The bottom line is the reserve value of currency is tied to the dollar. In other words, we buy oil mostly in dollars. So if the value of oil goes down or it becomes irrelevant, the value of money, that's where the investment goes, it's also at risk. So no institutional investor is going to invest in technologies like this and make them widely available. So what we have is now a system that looks at market valuation over human scale values. Valuation now trumps value, and that should explain a lot of things. That explains things like this. That explains why we're now looking for oil in places, in rocks, and spending millions of gallons of water. That explains why we're poisoning our water. That explains why some of us are talking about nuclear being safe. I don't know if you know, but Carl Z. Morgan was the guy who first did the Manhattan Project, and he spent the second half of his life basically advocating that once he figured out that the isotopes have an irreversible effect on our biology, there is no such thing as safe nuclear. Okay, I'm running out of time. This is such a passionate topic for me, and I'm not going to be able to get through it, but I just want to share with you something very quick. We're doing a lot of this. You know, we're showing you this, and we're dazzling the debt, and we're hiding the real cost. We're dazzling the debt, and we're hiding the real cost. But we're running up against this, and we've got to do something about it. And, you know, energy is abundant, it is accessible to everyone, and it can empower everyone, and it's really up to you. You make the rules, and I want to show you some things. I wish I had more time because there's so many things that's happening right now. What we're doing with crowdsourcing, crowdfunding innovation, innovation networks, open source innovations, the hacker spaces, sharing stuff, this is all the beginning of putting value back into the human world. Being able to share our resources and share our rewards. We can actually start to live a world where we go to value beyond valuation. We have this technology. We can take advantage of all the energy that's around us. We have amazing materials that enable us to grow in arid climates. We have awesome people. And it's exponentially growing. And we're actually starting to work on very cool projects to make these things happen right now. And I want to share with you one last thing. There's so many of these things I can share in terms of the innovations, but there's one last thing, one simple principle for us to think about how we can actually make the abundant energy revolution real. And we talked about the oil thing, but think about this. If we can start to think of our lives and our businesses in terms of zero operating costs, we're well on our way. And there are things that we do already that reduce the cost of things. We don't have to get stuck with things that we buy that we don't want anymore. We can actually start to experience things for what they really are and share value on a human scale. Energy is abundant, it is accessible everywhere, it can empower everyone, and this is such a deep topic, and there's much more information in the book that I wrote, and and so much more things that I'm doing with some brilliant people. That some of them are in this room. Eco villages, innovation portals, new paradigm for investing. So many different things we can do right now, and it is happening. The abundant revolution is real. It has to happen. If it doesn't happen, we're really screwed. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ray, you have a question over here. Yes. You know, we can't find. We're still waiting for the other speaker, so if you just want to. Oh, here she is.
If you want to open it up to questions, we've got our next guest just about on the way.
Please, yeah. Absolutely. Let me just grab my water.
Sure.
Yes.
Please talk more about value trumping valuation and zero cost, zero operating cost.
Okay.
You had that?
So,
do you need this? Or you have...
well, I don't think this is working. So, gentleman asked about value trumping valuation and zero operating costs. Well, we actually, so in the beginning I showed you the picture of the hot model next to the sports car, right? So we buy things that the market values at a particular price because we think that that is the value of the object. We never necessarily question what is the intrinsic human value that we're getting from that particular transaction. So what is that? Is that a midlife crisis that I'm buying? You know, is it, am I trying to get laid? You know, what you know, am I trying to show off to my friends? Am I trying to say that I have money? We're buying actually those things on human terms and not necessarily on market terms. Now, the web enables us to capture a lot of information that we could not previously capture. So whether something is going to actually address those particular needs that I'm looking for is not necessarily expressed in a market system that is very myopic in evaluating things. So there's a lot of ways to find value through interactions, through networks that we can't find in the monetary system as it is. And it is evolving. There's a lot of very smart people thinking of different ways of how to use local currencies, how to use barter systems, how to use swapping systems, how to use valuation in the ways that co-credits. There's a brilliant website called cosmosjournal.org that talks about a fundamentally new way of looking at commons and using capital in the commons. And this is not about, you know, socialism, communism, or any of those isms. It's really about thinking about value in human terms, because the ultimate tenet of capitalism, which we all espouse, is really to have our means of production. It's not to have you know, industrial imperialism that somebody else is reaping the benefits of. It is really up to us. So I mean, this is a longer discussion, but thank you for your question. Did that kind of go in the direction that you were seeking? Thank you. Anyone else questions about either energy or?
One more question?
Yeah.
About population, like it increases population when you have cheap energy and stuff like that. That's sort of maybe not so productive.
Right. Okay. So one thing to look at, if you look at an aerial map of any region today versus about 50, 60 years ago, you'll start to see that the population is starting to move towards the edges into the cities. Now there's urbanization happening, right? But what you don't see is all the land that we have wasted in that process. So do you know how many abandoned drill sites do you think there are in the U.S.? Anyone know? 6 million plus. And do you know what happens every time somebody drills and leaves it alone? It decimates the land, it decimates the ecosystem, and basically it's wasteland. So we are creating wasteland through mass agriculture. We're creating wasteland to the assumption of scarce energy. We really don't have a population problem as such. We have a resource allocation problem, and distributed energy systems and resilient community systems can answer that and then some. We can actually reverse, what I showed you with that slide with the ecological footprint. It can actually go backwards if we start to distribute our resources and use the land for what it was intended for, because we actually know many efficient ways of using that. Did I answer your question? Any other questions? Cool. Thank you so much. It's a genuine pleasure.
A big round of applause, please.